Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon on a Friday afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Tracy. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Training at the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences. And this is our 7th and final Centennial Research and Training Colloquia for this year. So we have a good group for our final one. Now, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, gee, this is kind of a neat thing to do on a Friday afternoon, come to the school and have lunch. Next Friday, at this very time, at this very place, there is another lecture called the Stein Lecture. It's presented by Dr. Yadama, who's a MSSA graduate and a PhD graduate of our program, and he's now the Dean of Boston College. So we're very pleased to have him come, and his topic is related to the community type things that you're going to talk about today. This colloquia series, though, returning to what we're doing today, is co-sponsored by the Office of Research Administration and the doctoral program here at the school. And just a few logistics. As you may know, when you go out this door down the lobby, the restrooms are there. If you are picking up a CEU certificate, that's where your certificate will be at the end of the presentation today. And if you're a student wanting PD hours, make sure you sign that form so that we turn that in to the field people. How many community practice students do we have here today? Do we have a little group? You have a following. So, hey, you made a good choice to come today, right? Because some of your faculty members are here. I wanted to give some thank yous to Ina Brand, to Carm Gambites, who picked the menu for today, and to Tracy Braden for their help in putting this whole series together over this semester. We will have a question and answer time, and because we are recording, we will have Taryn run to you with the mic. Try to restrain yourself until the mic gets to you so that the question can be recorded and also the answer. And for those of you who are connecting remotely, there are a number of you, and I hope some of my students are connecting remotely too. If you are viewing live streaming, welcome. And you can also email questions to Mandel School, one word, at case.edu. So if you have a question, the person, Tracy, I think, is monitoring the computer and will get that question to us. Our centennial theme for this year was featuring our own Mandel School cutting edge research. And so today's topic on the Cleveland Effectoring Neighboring Project is presented by a whole participant action research team. And that's why you were given the list of all the people who are part of this project. So it consists of faculty, students, research staff, community developers, and community leaders. And at 2 p.m. after this presentation in room 114, if you want to talk more, they will be available, and you can talk more informally then. And so for now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Joseph is going to speak first. So my colleague, Dr. Joseph, he's the director of the National Initiative on Mixed Income Communities, and he will start the presentation and also introduce you to the distinguished team that he's brought with us today.
So thank you, Betsy. Dr. Tracy thinks of every single detail in planning these events. Can we give her one more hand, please? You make it very, very easy to do this. And also Tracy Braden has also been doing a lot of help. Great to see. Yes, let's give Tracy a hand. It's great to see so many people out on a Friday afternoon and so many friendly faces. One friendly face in particular. Can everyone say hi to the love of my life, sitting just a few rows back there? Melanie works across campus in the engineering school. She does youth development there, so thanks for coming across. All right, we have a lot. This is gonna be wonderful, so I'm glad you all chose to come out, and we've got a great group of speakers for you. So my job is to move along and get out of the way. Here's what we're gonna do. We wanna set the context a bit, tell you a little bit about the organizations that are part of leading the project, because there's a lot that we're up to besides this particular project. We want you to have a sense of what we're doing, because there may be other things that you're interested in that we could be a supportive resource for. We're going to talk a little bit about our research findings, 13 years worth of research findings on mixed income communities, and how that led us to today and to this particular project. We'll do that quickly. And we're going to talk about some interesting demographic changes in our own city, which makes this actually an ideal place to do this kind of study. So we'll set some context. Really what we want to spend most of our time talking about is this notion of effective neighboring. What does it mean? Where did it come from? What do we currently think it means? What do we hope residents will help us figure out what it really means? And how do we do it better and better in more places? We'll talk about that, and we'll get into our project, We are coming out of phase 1 of this project and into phase 2. So you're catching us as a really cool moment. We learned a tremendous amount, some unexpected things in phase 1. So in a moment, B1 is going to tell you about what we learned from phase 1, how we changed the project in a pretty significant way because of what we learned in phase 1, and then where we are planning to go in phase 2. Morgan's going to tell you about that. We have an awesome set of partners on this project, and some of them were kind enough to come join us today. So we've left almost half of our time for our partners to come up and talk to you about why they're involved in this project, who they are. They're going to brag about their blocks a little bit, and then they're going to talk about what they hope to learn and get out of this. So we're really excited to have them. And then we'll say a quick slide at the end about future direction. So that's the game plan. The context, I don't need to tell you we are in crazy times in our country and in our world. What does that have to do with effective neighboring? And for us, we think it has everything to do with effective neighboring. I think a truth is that as we become more diverse as a country and as a society, we're also becoming more polarized. So if you just play that out in years and decades, we have a real question for what kind of America we're going to become, what kind of Cleveland we're going to have, what kind of cities we'll have. So we think that a core part of that is we need to live together, around each other, experience each other, but that's not enough, as we'll talk about more. So this is, you heard, I'm the founding director of NIMC, and there's several folks in the room with our center. We do 4 main things that you can see up here. So just to kind of flash that up to you, so you have a sense of us as a relatively new, just 4 years in, resource at the university. We think each and every day about the question of how to promote and sustain successful mixed income communities. I just flashed this up so you can get a sense of, we've got a full portfolio of research on the left-hand side, and a full portfolio now of consulting projects on the right-hand side. And so this effective neighboring, which we have in red, is just one slice of what we're doing. One of the more exciting things we're doing, and you'll hear why that is, but just wanted to give you a sense of the breadth of our current scope of work. And this gives you another picture of it. These are places that we're involved in right now around the US. And then finally, this is the move that we've made in the last few months, is to go from our center, which you see at the middle here, and form 2 major national partnerships. One is our consulting partnership, and one is a strategic alliance with 2 groups, all 3 of which are from other places in the US. This year, we are launching a network, a national network, that will ultimately be a peer affinity group among some of the more exemplary projects doing mixed income development work around the country. So we've really expanded our scope. We think of ourselves as a mixed income enterprise, not just a mixed income center. And now I'm going to hand to Dr. Chupp, who will tell you about another exciting new center at the Mandel School.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And I want to say a little bit about my work, and as a way of introduction, as a partner in this project as co-PI. For the past year, I have been reorganizing my work here at the school around a new initiative called the Community Innovation Network. And the mission of the Community Innovation Network is to strengthen communities by uniting practitioners from different community building and community development approaches, and by amplifying their practices, their leadership, and their knowledge. And there's 4 different areas that we work in, and I'll just say a little bit about each of those. The first is around strengthening communities, is training and capacity building, and we have a robust program in that. And the second is sharing knowledge through an online toolkit, an open source set of tools that people can use, whether they be communities or practitioners, and an online library of journal articles. And then a newer initiative is we're doing profiles of asset-based communities across the country. The third area then is around connecting people. So we connect people by facilitating connections through dialogue. We also have a network of practitioners, and one of our presenters today, Lee Kay, is a member of that practitioners network, and so we bring people together that way. And then the 4th bucket is really about building community by applied research, doing consulting, and actually facilitating processes in a community. Let me give you a few samples just of the work that we've been doing. So in the area of research, we have a new initiative that we started since the election called Bridging the Divide in a Polarized Society. Tracking hate is one piece of that. And so we're looking at creating an online system for people to report when there's been an incident where they've been a victim of hate. And then designing a set of public dialogues to bring people together across that polarized society that Mark talked about. And then last year, as a sample of this work, we did a project in Geauga County with, supported by United Way and one of our graduates, and we did that in conjunction with the Center for Community Solutions. And we conducted client surveys, agency surveys, and then we did focus groups and key informant interviews around the low-income population, underserved population in Geauga County. The outcome of that was a community engagement toolkit, so those agencies could learn how to do those methods on their own after we left. In the area of training, we're creating a certificate program in appreciative inquiry and another one in asset-based community development. That's training we've done in the past, but we're formalizing that into a training program. And then we have a training calendar that we've been working on with Neighborhood Connections. And so this is our spring-summer program, which is a printed calendar. And it's called Neighbor Up University, and we do that in conjunction with Neighborhood Connections. The area of practice then is consulting work that we do on occasion, and so we just launched a strategic planning process with WireNet, which is the nonprofit intermediary for manufacturers in Northeast Ohio. So we'll be interviewing and holding focus groups with, as part of that strategic planning process, with large and small corporations, manufacturers. And then we've just finishing up, and Jessica Larkins in the back has been the leader in this project, our field student, and she has been doing asset mapping and community engagement in 2 senior centers, one on the east side and one on the west side for Benjamin Rose. And so this is just a sample of the asset map that we'll be leaving behind. I want to also skipped over, but I want to mention that Heather Lenz is our assistant director, and she's a new hire, and she's in the audience as well over on that side. So I think I'm going to turn it now over to Mark, and he's going to introduce BWIN.
Okay. Thank you. So as I mentioned, how do we get to this effective neighboring project? And it really is the result of 13 years of research trying to understand what does it take to create and sustain mixed income communities. We've looked particularly at mixed income developments. Those of you familiar with Hope 6 or Choice Neighborhoods, that's been our area of study. And so I'm going to summarize in 3 slides 13 years of research. So if you hear that academics are not able to be concise, we're going to disprove that right this second. And we skipped over 1. That's one way to be quick. Skip your first slide. So the kind of core question is, what would it mean to be successful? If you've got a successful mixed income community, what exactly would that mean? So this is based on hundreds and hundreds of interviews with both residents of communities, but also people working on them, developers, service providers, property managers. And here's what we came up with, this 5-part success framework. First of all, you got to build it and promote it as mixed income, and you have to sustain it as such. Secondly, it's successful if then you've got a better physical environment. People are enjoying a better quality of life because they live in that space. Third, it's not just about the housing and the parks and the physical space and the lighting. It's also about community and the people. And the term that we've coined to discuss that, or describe it, is effective neighboring, that people are effective. And you're going to hear a lot more about that in a second. Fourth, you don't want folks to be living in a mixed income community but still stuck in the same economic situation. Right? The whole point is you get into a mixed community and then you get on a different trajectory for a variety of reasons. Fifth, it's no good to create these amazing mixed income communities and revitalize the neighborhoods and push out the people who've been sticking it out all the whole time before it was a mixed income community. So that's the 5th factor you want. So very quickly, here's really the summary slide. There's some things that are going really well. There's some things that are going mixed. And there's some things that are going really badly in this policy area. So what's going well? Number 1, increased quality of life, right? We have fabulous real estate developers coast to coast in this very city who can develop any neighborhood, turn it around, and make the physical environment work. We also now are seeing neighborhood revitalization, that if you can turn around a block, if you can turn around a development, that you're going to start to see spreading benefits. However, the displacement part is not so successful. In a lot of cases, you do that physical transformation, people start to get excited about it, and then it turns into what? Gentrification, right? And people get displaced. So that's an area we still have a lot of work to do. In terms of promoting and sustaining mixed income occupancy, we've also seen that as a challenge. Not necessarily the front part, right? People actually are willing to move into these communities, but how do you keep them there over the long term? Long enough for then a community to actually emerge. And on the front end, one of the biggest challenges, at least in the developments we've been studying, these mixed income Hope 6 style, is the rates of return for original residents is very, very low. In the 20s, 30% of all the people who live there coming back and getting to enjoy these new communities. So that's certainly a problem. All right, the stuff that keeps us up at night. Number one, folks are getting into beautiful communities where they can, but staying in the same economic position. So the housing is not enough, and being around a mixed community is not enough to get them on a different trajectory. And then the one we're gonna talk about today, that rather than seeing communities emerge where then neighbors start figuring it out, we're in a new space, we're among different people, how are we gonna live comfortably together? Instead, we see us versus them dynamics emerging very quickly. Small things at first, litter, noise, where do you hang out, how do you treat your kids, and over time, bigger and bigger, and then people start to move out and say, this is not something I want to do. So it was because of this last one that we decided we wanted to really drill down and do a project that just looked at it on a very granular level. My final slide. We had a book come out in 2015, and I may not be typical in terms of being concise, but I am typical. You can't waste a good opportunity to coin a new term. So we coined a new term in our book to really capture this answer, right? If the question was, in Chicago, did they successfully integrate people into these new communities? Our answer, Dr. Rob Chaskin from the University of Chicago and myself, is no. In fact, we had what we called incorporated exclusion. People were incorporated. They now were around other people, but they still very much suffered and told us about exclusion from their neighbors and from the broader society. That all of these millions of dollars of investment didn't result in people feeling more connected to their neighbors or to the society. So this is kind of the key jumping off point for this particular project. Because as you're gonna hear, we do have diversity emerging in certain blocks and neighborhoods in Cleveland, but that's not gonna be enough to get to the kind of social inclusion and social integration that we're looking for. And so with that, I'm actually turning back to Dr. Chupp.
Thank you. So what are we learning about Cleveland? So let's take this to the current context here. There's a partner on our team from Cleveland State University Center for Population Dynamics, Richard Piperinen, who's done some amazing research. And he talks about the fifth migration. But let's back up and talk about what the fourth migration was in the United States. And that was the suburbanization of our country, where people were moving out further and further out from this urban core. And that is a dynamic we're all aware of with declining population in Cleveland. It's a national problem. It's a current problem in Cleveland. And so we've seen continued decline in the metropolitan area and in the city of Cleveland itself. But in the midst of that, we've also recognized that there's a fifth migration. And that fifth migration is the reurbanization of the United States. And so Cleveland, like many cities in the country, is actually undergoing simultaneously that fourth and fifth migration. So what is that fifth migration? That's where younger adults and people with education are moving back into the city. And so we know this, we hear about this, it's changing the narrative of our city. So we have, since 2000 and especially since 2006, we have an increase in the population of 18 to 35-year-olds and people with bachelor's degrees. Interestingly enough, where are those people moving? Oh, sorry, did I? Yep, okay. So, thank you. So where are people moving? So what Richie found in his research is very interesting, is contrary to our stereotypes about the east side and the west side, actually the largest increase in African-American populations is happening on the west side, and the largest increase in white populations is happening on the east side, in east side neighborhoods. So what is that about, right? And so these dynamics are unfolding and gentrification is happening, but the question is, can it position the city to really be a model of neighborhoods, of development in an equitable and integrated neighborhood? So are we creating the kind of conditions that will really make for the kind of Cleveland we want? And how can these diverse neighborhoods actually become more socially integrated to address, or is it corporate exclusion? And so the question is, simply developing these creative class enclaves, whether it be in Ohio City or Tremont, he posits that it will do nothing to transition Cleveland from being this segregated, siloed community with high rates of poverty. How do we get to that globalized, integrated city comprised of neighborhoods that produce human capacity? That's the question that we want to ask ourselves. And so are we reinforcing those silos and segregated areas with enclaves, or are we creating really an integrated community? Well, here's one part of the answer. These are photos from Cleveland. So on the right, you have this beautiful message about welcoming no matter where you're from and who you are. And on the left, if you can't see, this does not say welcome. It says go away. And the blinds are shut. So some of you might think, well, that was probably just a joke by the occupant to buy this cute little floor mat. But what would it do if you were a new resident moving in from outside to this street? What kind of message would that send to you in the current climate we're in? So we have both of these realities happening in our city. And the question is, how are we going to address those? So let's talk a little bit about our research. So we have a working definition, and this is our definition of effective neighboring. It's the process through which neighbors from diverse social, economic, and cultural backgrounds establish a level of familiarity and shared expectations that enable them to live together comfortably. It's not about friendship, but it's about living together comfortably. Effective neighboring requires that residents identify some common aspirations for their building or for their block or their neighborhood, and they learn to compromise and modify their behaviors to create an environment where all can feel welcome, be comfortable, and thrive. So that's the definition that we're working from. Let's go back and look a little bit at the literature now, because a good research colloquium always has to have a lit review, right? So neighboring appears in the literature as early as 1968. And then in 1985, Unger and Wandersman did a good job of identifying 3 different components of neighboring. So the one is that social component that we often think of as social workers, the social support and the kind of networking that happens. But there's also a cognitive component, and that's the mental models that people have about how they think about their place. And then the third component they identify is that affective part, that sense of attachment, sense of social cohesion, and how people feel about their place. More recently, Kuzenbach in 2006 looked at the behaviors and the patterns of neighboring and came up with these 4 patterns. What we often tend to think of as somebody being neighborly, right? The recognition, saying hi to somebody, identifying each other. There's also that notion of the proverbial, can I have a cup of sugar from the neighbor? And that's a form of being helpful to one another. The third pattern then is about the proactive work that people do to watch out for one another, and that's a pattern of behavior as well. And then the fourth one is interesting because it can go either way. It's that sense of encouraging inclusion of neighbors who are different or resisting that inclusion. And so that's an interesting dynamic where sometimes some folks are included at the expense of others. And so there's a hunkering down kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit about our project and the overview. There were 3 major aims we had in our research and when we set out. The first is to look at exemplary effective neighboring examples here in Cleveland. Small, micro neighborhoods, and we didn't want to go elsewhere. We wanted to know what's happening here in Cleveland. We wanted to put Cleveland on the map. The second was to design, implement, and refine our models of effective neighboring, and I'm going to share a little bit about that in a minute from phase 1. And then really, this is an action-oriented research, so it's to build that block-level capacity to bridge diverse neighborhoods and promote social inclusion. So it's addressing what we think, if left to its own devices, we may not get to where we want to be as a city and as a country. So this is a very complex diagram, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'll say that last summer we spent a fair amount of time trying to develop a model based on the research that we were doing. And we started with this people and place orientation, and we recognized there were a number of preconditions, looking at the green boxes, that lead to effective neighboring. And so what happens, what are the conditions prior to that activity? And then there's an area of intentional actions that occur, and then there's a set of what I like to call these two boxes that we were trying to discover is what is the secret sauce? Because you kind of know when you feel it when it's there, and you say these folks know how to relate to each other, they're comfortable with each other, but what is it? And so we were trying to identify what are the factors in that secret sauce. What we realized, though, as we were doing this model development, is that there's a similar path happening at the bottom. So that was not necessarily the focus of our research, but we began to say, wait a minute, there's a set of preconditions that kind of lend themselves to exclusionary activity. And there's some intentions and actions that happen that lead to exclusion as well. And so we started mapping that out. And so we came up with these two paths last summer and began testing those. Now, I'll tell you, this is not the current model, but stay tuned. So you'll hear more about that. All right, now I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joseph, and he's going to introduce BWIN.
Just very quickly, I'm going to invite up the person literally without whom there would be no colloquium today. We'd be sitting here to an empty room. We're so proud of BWIN for so many, many reasons. She's an MSAS grad, community practice. She has been an intern with our center, and she's been an employee with our center for the last year. And she's now headed to the University of Chicago in the fall to start her PhD program, where she'll be studying at the social work school there and following up on these very issues that she's so interested in. So with that, BWIN.
Hi, everyone. So now I will spend a little bit more time introduce what we did in the phase 1. So in the phase 1, our objective at that time is to identify and select exemplary effective neighboring examples. So the first thing that we did is set up 4 basic criteria. What is exemplary effective neighboring example? The first and also the most important thing is we want to say there's intentional actions about bridging diverse populations and residents successfully. And the second one, we want to find out places that are micro-communities. By that we mean block and a street where people live next door to each other and they can have regular neighborly interactions. And the third one is we want to make sure those intentional actions are residents-driven instead of being facilitated by external organizations. And the last one is we want to say those intentional actions are the ongoing and the regular behaviors and interactions instead of just like once every year thing or maybe seasonal activities. So we use these criteria to search around the whole city and try to find out some exemplary effective neighboring examples. And we have a small team at that time. And we spent 6 months talking to a lot of people, including residents grantees who receive grants from Neighborhood Connections to start some projects in their own communities, in their own blocks. And we talked to grassroots residents leaders who attended the Neighborhood Leadership Development Program. And also we reached out to community organizers. They work at the community development corporations. And also we spent a great amount of time identifying and attending community events, community gatherings, and talked to a lot of residents and try to collect their effective neighboring stories. And we conducted interviews with 51 recommended examples. And among the whole pool of recommended examples, there are 39 of them. They show different levels of effective neighboring. And we can see there are some intentional actions happening between diverse neighbors. And there are 50 of them. They show some level of success. That's something that they have already done over years, actually bridge diverse neighbors instead of just like nothing really happened. And we have opportunities successfully reached out to 11 of them. So at that time, we participate more community events, and we sometimes just show up in the street in a very sunny weekend afternoon and try to grab people and talk to them. And also we try very hard to make sure that we talk to multiple residents who come from very different backgrounds. So if our initial interviewee is a white homeowner, we try very hard reach out to a black residents or a renter or residents who may not just living in the street for a very long time. So we want to make sure that we hear very different perspectives, and we want to make sure that all the stories that we heard from different residents are consistent with each other. And it took us a pretty long time, finally landed on 3 blocks that we are going to proceed to the second phase of this project. Oh, thanks. So several learnings and reflections from the phase 1, identifying and selecting effective neighboring examples. It's kind of disappointing to say that, but I have to say that we cannot find any exemplary effective neighboring examples that fit every criteria, that we find the intentional actions really successfully connect, bridge all the different people living in the street who come from different race, different ethnicities, who have different religions. And we find out, even though in some very promising examples, we can still clearly say there's exclusionary dynamic exists in there. So one quick example here is we went to a very lively block block party last year, and the residents did a great job reaching out to a great amount of residents, and there was a very excellent turnout. And all the people showed up in the block party, they mingled very well. And some residents, they probably live on the north side of the street. They finally got a chance to talk to residents living on the south side of the street. And some residents, they introduced the street and said, there are a lot of renters living our street. And when we walk around and we ask around, actually there's only one renter showed up in the block party. And people don't really feel that they have already successfully figured out a way to engage the renters living in the street, even though they know there's a great component, they are a big part of their street life. And also we find out inclusion and exclusion can coexist on one block. So one example that I want to share with you is we talked to a white resident and we talked to a black resident living on the same street, but we heard totally different stories from them. So it really doubted us that, are we talking about the same place at the time? And sometimes neighboring, and one thing that we learned from that example is sometimes neighboring can become to a way that neighbors who come from very similar backgrounds, they use neighboring to unite themselves and to exclude themselves from other neighbors who may look different from them or who have very different backgrounds from them, instead of using neighboring as a way to really bridge that diversity and break down the us versus them dynamic. And during this process, we keep asking ourselves a question: how do we proceed this project if we don't have any exemplary effective neighboring examples? So the way that we come up at this moment is we turn this project from an exploration model to an intervention model. So we are going to work with the residents to not only explore what is the secret sauce there, but also to create the secret sauce there. And one thing that we want to highlight here is, even though it's a disappointing process to a certain degree, that find out there's lots of exclusion still exist in our blocks and the street, but we identify a great amount of residents leaders who are very committed and who have already tried years to reach out to their neighbors and to build a more inclusive and cohesive street for themselves. So we want to work with them and to proceed this project to the second phase.
Great. And Mark's going to be back. Dean Gilmore, so we might be losing Bwen to the doctoral program, but if we can save an assistant professor slot for her about 8 years from now?
Yeah. Thank you, Bwin. So I said there was more to come in terms of the model. So this is our current model, and I want to just take a little bit time to explain it. So one of the things you'll notice in this is there's no longer the bifurcated model of one path versus the other. And as the examples that Bwin just gave, we recognize that there may be simultaneously inclusionary and exclusionary activities happening on the same street. So we start with the same people and place focus. Now the preconditions are a continuum. They're not exclusively sort of pro-inclusion or pro-exclusion. And so some of these can be used, reaction toward a critical incident, bridge builders or social connectors can be used both to include and to exclude. And so we wanted to document that. The biggest change is probably in the intentionality, so that we still have the intentional actions that are meant to bridge across diversity, but we also have at the bottom where there's no intentional activity on the street or where there's actually exclusionary activity. And then in the middle, we have intentional actions that that include some neighbors but may exclude other neighbors, as the example that we just heard. So we're trying to be more nuanced about this, and then we get to this area here, the secret sauce area, and we are going to share the recipe, by the way. And we believe that these dynamics still happen down here. So it's a little more complex, and we're still building this as we go, but it's been a really interesting exercise to go through this work. And so over here, just in case you can't read, are what are the outcomes of effective neighboring and what's the impact? And so that's what we're really driving for, is to find out what are the behaviors and the outcomes that lead to these effective neighboring inclusionary communities. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Joseph.
All right, now I get to introduce the other all-star student member of our team, Morgan Bolger, and she will be telling you about phase 2, so I'll pop it up there. Morgan, we met in this very building. Actually, we had an event for the book when it came out, and Morgan came up and bought a book and introduced herself and said she was a student over at Weatherhead in the doctoral program, but very interested in issues of social exclusion and what we could do about it. And it's been fun watching her get increasingly excited and fired up about what we're doing over here at the Mandel School and spend more and more time with us. So as Bwin is leaving us this summer, Morgan will be stepping up to help lead the project. So she's the perfect person to tell you about phase 2.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the research methods that we'll be using, particularly in this current phase 2. So we're doing a case study methodology with the 3 specific blocks. And then in addition to that, we're also using something that's called participatory action research. So if you're not familiar, it's a really cool methodology. Essentially, anyone that would be a participant in a research project gets invited to actually be a part of the whole research project. So anything from designing surveys and interviews to conducting that actual research to analyzing the data. It's really an opportunity to both get a better sense of what is actually going on, because people that are living in neighborhoods are the experts of those neighborhoods, but also just sort of a more empowering process than a traditional research method. So really excited to be trying out this new method, and I'm personally learning a lot about it, so it's really cool. And then in terms of the specific data collection, we're doing surveys, interviews, we're going to be doing participant observations, so continuing to go to events as they come up, or just hanging out on different blocks and getting to know what's going on in the area. And then lastly, we're going to be doing some field experiments. So in order to get a sense of a baseline of how much effective neighboring is in an area, we're starting to think through different ways of measuring that. So, walking down a street on a Saturday afternoon and seeing how many people actually wave hi to you is one example of things that we're considering. And then to show you sort of our research team structure here, in line with that participatory action research. So up at the top, we've got our 3 sites or 3 blocks that we've identified. And then within those blocks, we're starting to identify these resident leaders or resident liaisons. So these are people that are highly connected. They know what's going on. They know a lot of people in their neighborhood. And they're sort of going to act as a bridge between helping us engage more residents in this process and also directly informing the research that we're conducting. Also helping us with that project is effective neighboring connectors from Neighborhood Connections. So essentially we've got 3 awesome people that are going to be helping to sort of bridge that process and help us to do a little bit more engagement than what we're able to do with our own time and team. And then down at the bottom, there's NIMC and our other major partners. So Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, Neighborhood Connections, the Center for Population Dynamics at CSU, and then Nelson Beckford from St. Luke's Foundation. So really, the research team is this collaborative, cross-dimensional team that I think is really going to benefit the work that we're able to do. And then looking at sort of the implementation process for this phase 2, I'm not going to walk through each stage, but essentially you could think of this as a broader pre-test stage, a design stage, and then an implementation stage. So getting a base level of the effective neighboring in an area, starting to engage residents and develop that PAR partnership, and then designing these actual effective neighboring models in each block. They might end up being very different depending on the dynamics of the block, and then implementing that effective neighboring model, starting to do that intervention, see if we could actually improve the level of effective neighboring and inclusion in each of these blocks. And currently we are on this sort of stage 1, moving into stage 2, so engaging research participants, forming that PAR partnership. You guys are going to get to hear from some of our awesome resident liaisons today.
Let's do that right now. So, thank you, Morgan. You want to give her a hand? Yes! All right, let's stop bragging about our awesome liaisons and connectors. Let's let you hear from them. So we're going to switch out these guys, and we're going to invite in our core folks coming up. We've got JR and Mark McLean, who are coming up to you, and I'll introduce them in a little bit more detail as each of them speak, and also Lee Kay and Mordecai Cardigill. So come on up. So again, this is an opportunity for us to thank these folks publicly for committing. I'm not sure if they realize just how much they've committed to yet. We'll hear from them in a moment. We'll see. Now they're hearing more about the project, they might say, wait a second here, what have we committed to? No, but we know they're all very enthusiastic about it. So we're going to start off, you'll hear from the 2 resident liaisons, and then we'll go to our partners. And our first up is JR, who I just met recently, but I know he's been talking with Bwen and Morgan for a while. And I'm just really excited for you to hear both a little bit about his personal story, because it really clicked when he told us about his childhood, why he'd be a person who was naturally an effective neighbor, and why he would be so excited in a project like this. So with that, I'll hand over to JR. You can sit, stand, however you feel comfortable.
Standing. Good afternoon, everybody. I am JR. I am from a very diverse background. My father was a Marine, and bringing us up, he put us, excuse me for saying it, in between 2 white families. He put us here, right in the middle. And as a child, we didn't think nothing of it. That's normal. It's normal to go over here and play with Bobby. It's normal to go over here, and do things. But as I grew up, I started to realize something different, something not right. They eating Cheerios and we eating shredded wheat, which, that's normal. But when you come along and see the real difference, we couldn't go over there and eat. And they couldn't come over our house and eat, but we were all together. As children, you don't know that. Racism is taught. And we just looked at it and said, we got to change this. My father wanted us to see different things and deal with different people. And that's what we did in growing up. And I instilled that in my children. Today, you're blue, I'm yellow, but we all pump blood from our hearts. And that's how we live. That's how I taught my children the things we do. You know, it's some people say it's crazy because you just go and do it. But then some people have barriers that you can't cross. And that's where we get stymied. That's where we get stopped in, you know, in our growing, in our neighborhood. When I first came to my neighborhood, I'm walking to the store every day in the snow, trudging to the store. But some said, why don't you take your snowblower and clean you a path? So all the time, I took my snowblower, I cleaned the path all the way to the corner. And I live in the middle of the street on 128th Street. It's a very long street. And I did. I took that snowblower every day. Every day it snowed. And after that one path, I said, you know what? I'm gonna cross the street and go back down this way. So now I'm doing the other side, coming back up the street. Now I'm doing the whole street, you know, and I'm looking at it as exercise. Other people was like, that is so great. Do they pay you for this? I said, no, actually, I really wanted a path to go to the store and get my beer, you know. I got tired of trudging with that beer, you know. So it became a habit. And on my way doing it, hello, how you doing? How you doing? You know, conversation started, you know. And people didn't talk to each other on that street. I come outside, I look down the street, I'm the only person on the street. So one day, I just went next door. Hey, how you doing? My name is JR. Oh, I don't want anything. I say, me neither. I just want to talk to you. You know, I just want you to know your dog in my yard. You know, well, how did he get there? I don't know, but he's still over there, you know. He is. But this is how you start. You know, this is how we change neighborhoods because no one was talking. They didn't want to talk. You know, and then you have those who just don't want to be bothered, don't want to get involved, you know, and the way we change that is every day. When I see you, hello, you're not coming down 128th Street and not get spoken to. Like I said, my house is in the middle of the street. You come down the street, hey, how you doing? The good people and the bad people, because you know the bad people. And I taught people to be vigilant. The bad people, let them know you're there. Let them know you see them. The people with bad intentions, hey, how you doing? Hey, can you pick that piece of paper up of me? I don't live on this street. You don't have to. But can you do that for me? But that's me letting them know that, you know, I'm here. I live here. I love this street. I love these people. You know, so we have to start and look deep within ourselves first. Before you know, say, oh, they should do this and they should do that. What are you doing? What are you doing? And me, I want every street in Cleveland to be like 128th Street. We have plant sales. We have block parties. We have what we call sidewalk parties, where if you outside cleaning your yard, I'm outside doing something, we just stop for a minute, sit down, and we sit on the curb and talk. And it's not nothing bad, we just talk. New neighbor come, we welcome them. How you doing? I'm JR, such and such and such. This is Mrs. So-and-so. And we make them feel welcome so they don't feel, you know, excluded. Because we can easily do that. We can easily turn our back. And then when you go to ask them to help you get involved in a program, oh, they just want some money. We don't want no money. We want your input. And you have to do that. And even with those who say no, when you see them that next day, hello, how you doing? Oh, there go that man again. Yes, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to say hello to you every time I see you, because I want you to feel welcome. I want you to be a part of East 128th Street. I want you to help me to build a good project. So when people come on 128th Street, what are they doing? Y'all having a party? We party every day, you know? And we do. We sit down, we talk, we just do things to come together. You know, Wayne told you how she came to our block party, which I'm the DJ. You know, I'm the DJ, I clean the street, I pick up paper, I do all of that. But fix cars, I fix, you know, I'm the neighborhood Fred Sanford. That's what one of my neighbors called me. Take it down there to Fred Sanford, he'll fix it, you know, and I will. How much do I owe you? Just be happy, you know.
Can you talk a little bit about why you want to be a part of this project? Because it sounds like you've got it figured out. So what do you think this project can do?
What I think this project can do is build a great America. It can bring us together. It can teach each and every one of us how to come together, how to be together. That effective neighboring, that is, oh my God, that's great. It is, but we have to instill that in our neighbor. And start with your neighbor right here. I didn't say bug them to death. Just put a bug in their ear. You know, that's all you have to do, put a bug in their ear and talk to them. That's what I did. Thank you.
Can we give Joe one? Yeah. So next up, can we get that one on? Next up is Mark McLean. Now, Mark is one of these folks, there's a couple on the panel who actually welcomed me to Cleveland 11 years ago. Mark's one of the first people I met when I came to town because he's involved in so many of the neighborhood leadership organizations. So we've known each other for a while, hadn't seen each other for a couple years. And then I heard about a resident liaison in Mount Pleasant who was going to work with us, who'd been excited about the project, Mark McLean. And so we got to sit just a few days ago and kind of talk a little bit more about the project. So very excited for you all to meet Mark. So Mark, come on up and tell your part of the story. Oh, let me push that forward.
Is here fine? Okay. I was just reading about, man, figured I needed to know a little bit more. I want to read you the beginning of an article that was written September 5th, 1976. It was in the Sunday Plain Dealer magazine. And it says, obituaries for inner city neighborhoods appear almost daily in newspapers throughout the country. But a Cleveland neighborhood, which tottered to collapse during the late 60s and early 70s, is being resurrected. Before the final judgment is passed, Buckeye may well find other communities initiating its example of integration and innovation. That was 1976. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I moved into the Mount Pleasant Buckeye neighborhood in about 2 or 3 months before John F. Kennedy was killed. And I remember that well. I was going to Lafayette Elementary School, and I was in the trash room. And someone came and said President Kennedy was killed. And during that process, you realize that we're all in things together. What happens to you happens to me, and what happens to your family happens to my family. Now that school is gone. It's torn down. It's the empty lot. Change. We talk about what was happening in 1970 in the 70s. I wrote my thesis, my college thesis, on the Buckeye neighborhood. I learned about how the Hungarians came in the Exodus in 1956 when the Russians invaded. And I remember walking down the streets of the Buckeye area and hearing strange languages that I didn't understand, passing by shops where I couldn't read the writing. But yet and still I felt a sense of neighborhood. Now there was a separation between those because many of those came from Hungary and they couldn't speak English. But I would walk by and say hi, and that salutation would be met by, ignoring me or acknowledging at least my presence. And there came a time when I was in college. I'd gotten a internship funded by the Kennedy School of Government from Harvard. And I spent that summer as a councilmanic intern. And I got to know quite a few Hungarian residents or descendants of Hungarians. And I found out that they were just like me, that they wanted the things that I wanted for the neighborhood. And they were striving to get the things that I was striving to get. But there was a segment of the population, both black, they were coming into the neighborhood more and more, and Hungarians who were leaving more and more, that they didn't want to connect with each other. I've learned over my few years on this earth that it's all about relationships. I'm a Baptist minister, and I read this book, and this book is about relationships. That's all it is. And I was listening to Mark and Mark talk about this project, and it boils down to relationships. If we can figure out how to negotiate and master our relationships, then Mark might not have a job. Mark may not have a job. I might not have a job. It's important especially in these times, their national problems and their local problems and their relationship problems. So, as you look at these neighborhoods, these communities, these, the root word community, common unity. That's all it is. And I moved back to Mount Pleasant. I moved back. I was gone for, I don't know how many years, but I was gone. And so my occupation changed at a stroke and, la. But I moved back into the neighborhood that I grew up in. I now live one street away from where I lived when I was a child. And it was a conscious decision to go there because I felt I had to give something. I wanted to give back to where I once was. And there were people who were there the whole time, living on the street 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they had the same attitudes, the same goals, the same aspirations. There's some of my contemporaries who were still there. It's worth saving. When I grew up, there was Woodhill Park, and now it's Luke Easter Park. The street on 130th and Griffin used to be Hudak's store. Now it's, I don't know what it's called. The cleaners that I got my first job in is now a corner store. I mean, there are these changes, but if you walk down the street and you don't look close enough, you see all the same people, all the same attitudes, all the same dreams, all the same desires, and that's worth saving. So why I came to this project is by when twisted my arm. But I'm glad I did, because that neighborhood, that community, my fellow man, my next door neighbor is worth saving, because if I save him, I will have a better chance. So that's what this is all about.
All right, so you can see why we're so motivated by this project, right? We didn't start out saying these were going to be our resident liaisons, but we had a sense there were folks out there. And so this discovery, just think how many more JRs and Marks there are waiting to be discovered on their block and activated and supported to do the kind of work that comes so naturally to both of you. So thank you. All right, now we're going to hear from Lee Kay, Miss Lee Kay, and we bump us forward. Another person who helped welcome me to Cleveland years and years ago. And this work absolutely comes naturally to her. She's been doing effective neighboring for a while, and so we're very, very lucky to have her as an asset and a coach in this process. So Lee, tell your part of the story.
It's my pleasure. My middle name is Mark. No, it's not. But I do have the same birthday as Mark McLean. So yeah. And they made me go after these two guys. So I'm just going to try to keep up, okay? This project is so important. I kind of think of it as kind of coming back around to what neighboring was when my father was born in Mount Pleasant. And he got his name, my grandmother had him in the house. And the doula, or the midwife who was there with her, yelled out the window to my uncle, who was a little boy, and was playing with his Jewish neighbor, and asked, "What should I name your brother?" And my uncle said, "Name him after my friend, Lewis." And so that's how my dad got named. That neighborliness, that over generations, it has changed. I was one of those kids that when I was 4 blocks away at school on the playground, if I did something wrong, it made it home before I did. Also, when my father called us, he would whistle. He would step out the door and he would whistle. And if I was too far away, some kid would come tearing around the corner. "Your dad whistled 10 minutes ago." So I had to run home. This project is helping us look at some of that stuff that still goes on. Some of that culture, that the way we now are more, we move a lot more. We work farther from home. Now both parents aren't home all the time. What are new ways for us to address that? What I really like about this is it helps us reflect and acknowledge and look at the importance of the small units of community on a block, where people can look out their windows, out their doors, down their streets, and see each other and hold those relationships, which are key, which create quality of community and culture, that if we as individuals are inclusive, everyone is included. I think that's really important. I really want to commend the team in doing an action research project, and Morgan said it, looking at residents who, there are going to be all kinds of people. You know, Mark is a pastor and has been a lawyer and a big community leader, and JR fixes cars and runs the snowblower. And so there's this broad strata of people to bring folks together, and they are the experts on their own community. I don't live there yet. But they know what goes on. They know what's working. And to tap into them and really find out what's really the good stuff that needs to be looked at. I want to acknowledge also the whole asset-based view, asset-based community development. We already know what all the problems are We can talk about them, we can run the statistics, we can pull the stories from the news. That's not what makes a community. There are good people, there are good places, there are gifts and talents, and it's important to tap into those. It is important to use those as the interventions to improve and create the neighborhoods that we want to live in. Rather than doing a study and then helicoptering in and dropping this idea and even prescribing it and saying, this is gonna work. Well, we don't necessarily know that. We need to look at what's already working, what already has possibility, and spread that good work and good news. And that's what this project is gonna do. It's already doing it. There are gonna be so many wonderful gems that get unearthed and brought up and polished so they can shine. There are good neighbors. There are qualities and powers in the people in Cleveland's neighborhoods because Clevelanders are resilient. You know, I believe, and I'm not the only one who has said this, if you can make it in Cleveland, you can make it anywhere. And so creating that opportunity to make that shine. Cleveland is a very hospitable place. When people come to Cleveland, they don't generally leave here going, I'll never go back there again. They say, Cleveland was nice. They made a TV show, Hot in Cleveland. But that's what Cleveland is. And this is an opportunity to really look at it. So I'm loving this project because it's gonna confirm and catalyze existing leadership, and it's gonna find new leadership. I see some of the leaders in here that I get to work with regularly, and I love them. And they're gonna be leading new leaders in, and it's just gonna be really powerful. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad to be a part of it. What I really look forward to is the validation and the resonance that this research is gonna generate, that is gonna tell Cleveland, we are awesome, and we just need to lean into that, so.
As you read, Lee is representing Neighborhood Connections, one of our major partners, and so literally she's here today. Her team, many of them are headed down to North Carolina for a workshop training, or else I'm sure they would have been there. So there's a number of folks who have partnered with us and will be playing key roles, so thank you again, Lee. Another key partner is Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and Mordecai is here representing that team, but he's also just individually been so enthusiastic about this project from the very, very beginning, and so I'm excited to have him share with you his thoughts.
Well, thank you. I have the tough job of going last, so I'll try to go quickly and respect everyone's time and send you on your way, I guess. So Mark asked me to kind of talk about why Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is involved, and then also why I am interested in serving on the Effective Neighboring Advisory Council. So I think that is it's partly a practical matter, and it's partly philosophical, at least for me. So first, with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, some of you may know, it's a community development funding intermediary that is committed to fostering inclusive communities of choice and opportunity throughout Cleveland. And so the inclusive part was an addition that we made in our recently completed strategic planning process. And the strategic planning process comes on the heels of a renewal of our long-term funding from our legacy funders, the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gunn Foundation, the Mandel Foundation. Also, an organizational assessment, which we're proud to have the Marks, as we call them, as our research partners. And then a 9-month-long planning process, which again, the Marks were really essential to being able to really facilitate and add those insights to our work. But the strategic planning process also, or during the process, I should say, we really spent a lot of time reflecting on kind of the context for our work, for community development, for neighborhood revitalization, and what it means in a city like Cleveland, where we see this uneven development happening throughout the city. And we're seeing an uneven recovery from the Great Recession, and you're seeing neighborhoods really starting to change in a positive direction, and that is certainly due to decades and decades of hard work and sacrifice by our really able community development system. But you're also seeing neighborhoods continue to decline, and you're seeing some neighborhoods have this kind of stagnated recovery. So it really forced us to rethink our approaches to community development and to really think about how does this work affect people, and how are people able to benefit from the recovery and the revitalization of their neighborhoods. And then how are they able to stay in neighborhoods once their neighborhood starts to change? And so I think essential to improving our work and strengthening our strategies to create strong, vibrant, more equitable communities throughout the city of Cleveland is just having that perspective that the Marks are really, and the rest of the research team have really kind of insisted upon. So for me, I'm particularly interested in this work because I come to community development rather recently. So I started at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress basically right out of undergrad. So I really have to credit our president and CEO, Joel Ratner, for his courage to hire someone who just has no skills. Like I went to a liberal arts school, so I didn't really have like the technical skills to directly apply to like the at times very technical work of community development. But nonetheless, he allowed me to come in and learn and at least write, because it's one thing that we're taught there. But for me, this work is important because as I'm continuing to learn about community development and about kind of the history of community development, it's really important to understand the work beyond kind of the theoretical, and really try to understand kind of in a concrete way like what this work actually means. So I think essential to that is proximity. And so Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is an intermediary. So we have this really interesting position between our funders and elected officials and civic leaders of all sort, and the people who do kind of the tactical work of neighborhood revitalization. And I think if we aren't able to really get more proximate to the problems that we're trying to solve, or if we're not able to really understand how people are actually being affected by our work, then it limits our ability to kind of revise our strategies when necessary, and to really make sure that our work is having the impact that it's supposed to have on the communities that we're trying to serve. And then lastly, I just want to say that I really appreciate kind of the scope of the project and the 3 neighborhoods that we're going to be looking at. Because I think it's very important to challenge these prevailing narratives about what makes a thriving versus a failing neighborhood. And the neighborhoods that we're looking at are neighborhoods where they aren't really seen as effective at anything. And I think it's important for kind of the very existence of our communities and of our society for us to really like challenge these narratives and really think about or think about the communities in different ways, but really to kind of insist on the humanity of the people who live in these neighborhoods. So I'm really excited and honored to be a part of this work.
All right, now's your chance. We have some time for Q&A, so you all stay right here. You all can probably just spin around if you want to answer questions from where you are. And I'm going to hand off a mic for Q&A, and you can pick who you like for the first.
Good afternoon. My name is Deandra Smith. Just a quick question. You said there were 3 neighborhoods specifically that you were targeting. What are the areas? Are they still the Mount Pleasant areas that Mark and JR are from, or?
Yes, that's right. So you've seen 2 of them. One is Mount Pleasant, and then one would be the block is 128th between Larchmere and Shaker, so call that kind of the Larchmere area. And then we're about to land on one on the west side. So near west side, we've been looking at a couple. One's between kind of Detroit Shoreway area. Another's an area they refer to as International Village area. So that'll be where our 3rd block will be.
That's what I wanted.
Thank you. Right behind? Yep.
Good afternoon, Keith Benjamin, City of South Euclid. Is there an effort to incorporate youth issues and youth voice into the Effective Neighboring Project?
I sure hope so. But that's going to be part of the discovery, right? Because we're going to be sitting down, and that's the part that's going to come out with neighbors on the blocks. Partly it depends, are there youth on that block? So maybe I can turn over and each of you can talk a little bit about the extent to which there are youth. Youth are an issue on the block. But yes, I hope that's a great leverage point to turn from a deficit model, because very often when you talk to folks about kids in neighborhoods now, it's a negative. Where the kids are hanging out, where they're getting into trouble, right? And to think about youth as assets in our communities. So I certainly hope that in each of these blocks, but that's going to come out from what we talk about with the neighbors and if that's a way that they want to move forward. But let me have each of you talk about youth in your blocks. Do you think that'll be an issue that'll come out as we're thinking about your block?
An issue, yeah. A goal is to really touch the youth because they're the foundation of the neighborhood, of the community. So we are looking in our area at a few things, but we've got to meet them where they are. And what's in my mind as to what they should do may not touch them. So we got to be really sensitive to that.
On my block, most of the children have grown up. And thank God, most of them are in college, and they're doing a lot of positive things. And I attribute that to our effective neighboring. I do, because we taught them, we showed them. I just wanted to say this one thing. When I moved in that neighborhood, one of the neighbors did something that really startled me. She bought me an apple pie. When the last time someone did that? And the kids said, well, Daddy, when we gonna eat it? We not. Okay, we're not eating that. But in dealing with children, it's tough. It's tough because this person don't want you telling their child what to do. But we still have to say, come on over here. I'll show you how to put that light bulb in that car. And I take it from there. Because instead of going over here stealing a bike, you can go put 3 light bulbs in a car and charge $10, and you got $30 in your pocket. That's my way of dealing with it.
Lee, do you want to speak to the youth question at all?
Yes.
I thought you did.
It's interesting. That youth is coming up. I'm a part of a lot of community gatherings that we call network nights and neighbor nights, where residents get to ask questions of each other and have conversations about issues and concerns they have in community. And in at least half of them, someone brings up a question of, what can we do to help youth do something, be better, do better in school, get jobs? What's really tough is the youth are not in the room to be a part of that conversation. And in my experience, and I had a recent experience, last network night, there was a question about what can we do about the high suicide rate in the CMSD schools. An adult asked the question, what can we do? I was so happy to see 3 teenagers who happened to be there who went to that conversation. And my understanding is they brought wonderful information and ideas to that conversation. The challenge is us creating space that is inclusive and welcoming and bring youth in as high value. And I'll even say treating them with respect and making them believe that they really have something to offer. So I sit with that. I'm working on that. I would love to host a conversation about how do we get youth to come in and lead on things that really impact them.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get a couple more questions in.
If I could just add one comment. MyCom, which is also funded by Cleveland Foundation. I'm sorry, you're filming this.
MyCom, the MyCom network, which is funded by the county and the Cleveland Foundation, is very active and involved in many of those neighborhoods, including the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. They're in Shaker as well as South Euclid, and they've been very helpful to us in incorporating youth voice into our planning efforts.
Thank you.
Just because this is part of our centennial.
Introduce yourself.
I'm David Crampton. I'm on the faculty here. And because this is part of our centennial, I just want to say I think this is really cool. I'm really impressed. And I want to give a shout out to Art Napperstack, who was a former dean here, whose community practice was in Israel. And then he came here to Cleveland and he said, hey, some of these same ideas could be used in Cleveland. And he connected us with the Mandels and the Jewish community, and it's like why we're here today. And he obviously knew everything you guys were, so I just feel like he's smiling right now, and I just want to say that. He understood about relationships. He understood, hey, Lou Stokes is chair of the HUD subcommittee on appropriations. Hey, Barbara Mikulski is chair of the Senate HUD subcommittee on appropriations. She's a social worker. Lou's a Clevelander. I can use this to get rid of public housing. I can create Hope 6 with what I've been able to do in Israel and Cleveland and the relationships I built. And so I just feel like that's part of our legacy. And since we're trying to remember our history, I think we should just remember that a lot of what you're talking about has been talked about in these halls before, not actually this building, but metaphorically in these halls for many years. So I just want to remind you of that history.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Mays. And when you're talking about effective neighboring projects, I'm sorry, let me back up. I work at a Cleveland school. I work at Kenneth Clement Boys Leadership Academy, where we build men of tomorrow starting today. Must add that in. But as you talk about building effective neighborhoods, I am concerned about where the educational piece is in that, because neighborhood schools seem to be disappearing. Part of my role is I work as a community wraparound site coordinator, so we're trying to wrap the community around the schools, but many of our neighborhoods really don't have neighborhood schools. So is that part of the research project, as part of your study? Can you talk about that? Sure. I'm sorry, and by the way, JR is my big brother.
All right, a proud sister. Yes, and we're going to have to wrap after this question, but we're going to be around, so for folks who have questions, you can come on up. I completely agree with you. Schools and education are a critical piece of this puzzle, and as we do our research nationwide, the move to school choice, where you go into a particular neighborhood, but the kids there go to 30 different schools, becomes a real challenge, right? Schools used to be a place. But in this particular project, we're at a block level. And so it's really going to emerge from, again, the conversations we'll be having starting over the next couple months with residents to say, where do you want to start? And it may be that a particular block says, you know what, let's use the school that's right down at the end here. It may be another block, it's something else, a community center or something else they want to do. So I hope we're going to see schools emerging. Stay tuned. But I completely agree with you. That's a key piece of this story. We're at the hour, so we're going to wrap. And Dean Gilmore, I think, is going to close this out. And then we'll be available for those who want to talk a little bit more.
Well, good afternoon. What a wonderful presentation that we all had. So I want to ask you to join me in thanking everyone who's been on the panels here for such a great presentation. It's the type of presentation where we want to hang around and we want to ask more questions, but I think more importantly, it's filled us with ideas. As I sat here, I thought about my own neighborhood. We're about in the same age range, growing up in an urban neighborhood. What made it successful? I mean, I and my friends, we came from working class. Nobody had college degrees, but we all got college degrees. How did that happen? What made that neighborhood successful? It also made me think about what my personal responsibility is now in my neighborhood. Am I crossing that fence? Am I talking with people? And so I think we all have that responsibility. It isn't just about a scholarly exercise. It's about what we each do every day. I'm glad that David brought up art and Apperstack. I was thinking of art too, as we sat here. We did a strategic plan at the school, and we adopted it in December of 2003. And a key part of that strategic plan was a decision by the faculty of the Mandel School to reinvest in community development, reinvest in our curriculum, revigorate it, and thereby engage more in the community. At the time, we had great faculty here, and fortunately, a number of them are still here, but we lost Art and Apperstack. He led that strategic plan in community development. I remember after one presentation he gave to the faculty in the fall of that year, he came up to me and privately said, "Cleve, they liked it." He was actually surprised. Well, he had a powerful message. And indeed, they did like it. And so unfortunately, we lost Art just 6 months after we had adopted that plan. And so we had to go out and find some great leaders to join our faculty, and we found the Marks. Mark Joseph and Mark Chupp. And I was so delighted to hear you referring to them as the Marks, because I thought that was an inside joke that we had, because in the early years, they did so much together in curriculum development in particular that we'd refer to, well, here's another presentation by the Marks. There was actually some concern that people thought we might be teaching Marxism at the school. Actually, wouldn't be that bad, but well, maybe today we are teaching Marxism in what's been presented. But what I also appreciate, and it's been demonstrated here, is the independent path that they've each followed. So in this presentation today, you saw work that they're doing within their scholarly groups and also within the communities, but coming together. So they've really shown a good model for independent scholarship, independent work in the community, but really effective ways of collaborating with one another and showing, certainly in what's been brought together today, this rather large group of people who are all collaborating together on an incredibly important project. It's about making our community even greater than it is. So I want to personally thank Mark Chupp and Mark Joseph for the work that they've done over all these years, and each of the members of the panel. Thank you.
Do you want to say do you want to close it out? I'll give Dr. Tracy the last word.
Oh, no. This was just really wonderful. I just want to tell you that you can stay, I think you can move to room 114 as a place to talk. It'd be a little smaller place to talk with people. Thank you all very much.
Have a good afternoon.